Welcome back to Joy of Architecture.
Hey there. Good to be diving in again.
So today we're tackling a really big one, data mesh.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely generated a lot of buzz, hasn't it?
It really has. We've got a stack of sources here, articles, papers, forum chatter, you name it. Seems like everyone has an opinion. And our mission really is to cut through that noise. Is data mesh genuinely this revolutionary leap forward for modern software and data architecture?
Or is it, maybe a bit overhyped, over-engineered perhaps, facing some serious practical hurdles that maybe don't get talked about enough?
That's the core tension, exactly. And to really dig into it, we thought we'd structure this deep dive a bit differently, more like a friendly debate.
Right, taking different sides of the argument based on what the sources are saying.
Precisely. So I'll lean into the arguments for data mesh, the transformative potential, the vision behind it that comes through in the material.
Okay, and I'll take the other side. I'll be questioning it, looking at the critiques, the downsides, the practical difficulties that are also highlighted pretty strongly in these sources. Playing devil's advocate, maybe.
Perfect. Because the central question seems to be, is this a necessary evolution solving real, complex data problems? Or is it this idealistic pursuit with huge practical barriers?
And that whole sociotechnical thing keeps popping up. It's not just about the tech stack, is it?
Not at all. It's fundamentally about people, culture, organization, maybe as much as it is about technology.
Which is probably why it's so challenging and so debated.
I think so.
Yeah.
So as you're listening, think about your own world, your data challenges. Does the idea of decentralizing ownership, giving it to the business domains, does that sound exciting? Or does it immediately make you think, uh-oh, chaos?
Yeah, keep that question in mind.
Okay, ready to jump into the core arguments?
Let's do it. Where do we start?
All right, so from the proponent's perspective, the argument laid out in the sources is pretty clear. Data mesh is presented as a necessary evolution. Why? Because the old ways, the traditional centralized architectures, the big data lakes, the enterprise data warehouses, they're hitting a wall.
Hitting a wall, how?
Well, in today's complex businesses, those central data teams just become bottlenecks. They're swamped. The sheer volume, the variety of data, the speed it's all coming in. They can't keep up with all the different needs from different parts of the business.
Right. I've definitely seen that pain point. Things get slow.
Exactly. It leads to inflexibility, slow delivery times, frustration. And data quality often suffers because the central team, well, they don't always have the deep business context for all the data they manage.
Makes sense.
So data mesh, proponents say, is this fundamental shift. It borrows ideas that worked well in modern software engineering, like domain-driven design, microservices, product thinking, and applies them to data. The goal is to scale both organizationally and technically.
Okay, that's the optimistic view. It sounds good. It addresses real problems. But the critics in these sources, they push back hard. They say, yeah, the problems are real, but this data mesh solution, it's incredibly complex, like really complex.
More complex than it seems.
Way more, potentially, and expensive. And it demands huge organizational upheaval, maybe more than proponents let on. The fear isn't just that it might not work.
It's that it could make things worse.
Exactly. Replace old problems with new, maybe even more difficult ones, like total data fragmentation, chaos, basically. And there's this worry it just offloads really hard data management tasks onto business teams who are, frankly, often not ready. They might not have the skills or the resources or even the desire to suddenly become expert data managers.
So it's like shuffling the deck chairs, as you said.
That's the criticism, yeah. Is it solving problems or just moving them around, maybe making them harder to see? Some sources suggest maturing your existing setup or looking at less disruptive things like data fabric might be way more pragmatic for a lot of places.
Okay, so that frames the debate really well. The promise of transformation versus the messy, difficult reality of actually doing it.
And that socio-technical angle is right in the middle of it, isn't it?
Absolutely. Proponents see involving the business domains, the people, as its strength that empowers them, aligns data with the business. But the critics see that exact same point as its biggest weakness. Because changing organizations, changing how people work, that's incredibly hard.
The hardest part, maybe?
Could be. Okay, let's rewind a bit. Where did this whole data mesh idea actually come from? What were the origins?
Yeah, was it purely about fixing those past failures?
According to the sources, Jean-Marc Degani introduced it around 2019, and yes, it was framed explicitly as a response to the failures of those big centralized data platforms to scale effectively.
Okay.
The why they failed is key. Those central teams trying to manage these massive monolithic lakes or warehouses just couldn't deliver value quickly enough for dynamic business needs. Data became a blocker, not an enabler.
Right, the bottleneck problem again.
Exactly. And the sources emphasize that lack of domain context in the central team led to quality issues, misunderstandings, lack of trust in the data. So data mesh is positioned as a direct answer, borrowing those distributed system patterns, domain-driven design, data as a product, self-serve platforms to fix the data world.
Okay, but is that story entirely new? Critics in the sources raise an eyebrow here.
How so?
Well, they argue that the problems aren't new, and the concepts, things like decentralizing data stewardship, domain experts caring about data quality, we've talked about these things for decades, haven't we?
We have, in different forms.
I-
Data marts, distributed databases.
Exactly. So some critics argue data mesh is more of a clever packaging of existing ideas, maybe good marketing, but not necessarily a totally revolutionary paradigm shift.
Ah, the repackaging argument.
Yeah. There's even criticism mentioned in the sources calling it a fad created by one person, questioning if applying software modularity directly to data is even the right analogy. Data isn't quite the same as code.
That's a fair point.
And then there's that Gartner assessment from 2022, predicting it might become obsolete before plateau. That's a pretty significant caution against seeing it as the final enduring answer, isn't it?
It definitely challenges the narrative. So the tension at the origin is it a genuinely groundbreaking response born of necessity or a smart synthesis and rebranding of older
It
concepts?
seems like it.
What's undeniable, though, is that strong influence from modern software engineering. Microservices, agile, DevOps, if your organization is already living and breathing that stuff.
The leap to data mesh might feel less daunting.
Potentially, yeah. The concepts might resonate more. But for organizations with more traditional centralized IT, this origin story, rooted in distributed thinking, represents a much, much steeper conceptual climb.
Okay, makes sense. So let's get into the core components then. The famous 4 pillars. Proponents present these as the bedrock, right? All interconnected.
Absolutely. And the first one is domain ownership. This is maybe the most radical shift.
Pushing ownership out.
Exactly. Out from the central IT or data team into the actual business domains, sales, marketing, manufacturing, whatever the teams that create and use and truly understand that data.
Why? What's the claim benefit?
Context. The people closest to the business process know what the data means, its nuances, its quality, how it should be used. So decentralizing ownership is meant to massively improve data quality, relevance, and build an accountability right where the data lives.
Okay, sounds logical in theory, but the critics jump right on this one.
What are the main concerns?
Well, first, the risk of creating new silos. If you decentralize ownership but don't absolutely nail the sharing and interoperability parts, you could end up with hundreds of little data islands, even harder to connect than before.
Fragmentation, yeah.
And just defining those domain boundaries in a complex company, that can be a nightmare. It's often political, messy, overlapping. Where does one domain end and another begin when it comes to data?
Good point. Often not clear-cut.
And then the big one, skills and resources. Do typical business domains actually have the data engineering expertise, the tools, the time, the budget to properly manage and serve up complex data assets as products? Many sources say probably not, or at least not without huge investment.
Right, which leads directly into the second pillar, data as a product. This is crucial for making domain ownership work.
Explain that one. It's more than just data, right?
It's a mindset shift, a big one. You don't just treat the data your domain produces as exhaust, as a byproduct. You treat it as a first-class product, specifically designed to be used by others.
So what does that mean in practice?
It means the data product needs to be discoverable. People have to be able to find it. It needs to be addressable, accessible through standard interfaces like APIs, trustworthy with defined quality standards, understandable, well-documented, secure, valuable. Basically, you're thinking like a product manager, but for data.
Okay. The goal being?
To make the data genuinely useful and reusable, driving innovation, because consumers can easily find, understand, and trust the data they need from different domains.
Again, sounds great on paper. But the challenge?
It's that mindset shift again. It's huge. Getting every domain in a large organization to think like a data product manager, that's a massive cultural transformation.
Yeah, I can see that being tough.
And the overhead. Defining, documenting, maintaining SLAs, service level agreements, like data freshness, guarantees monitoring quality, ensuring reliability for potentially hundreds, even thousands of these data products. That's a substantial ongoing effort that's often underestimated. It's a lot of work.
A heavy lift for sure. Okay, pillar number 3.
The self-serve data platform. This is a technology foundation that enables the first two principles.
So this is about the tools.
Exactly. It's about providing the domains with the infrastructure and tools they need to build, deploy, and manage their data products themselves without constantly depending on a central team.
Like what kind of tools?
Things like data catalogs for discovery, pipeline tools for moving and transforming data, standardized storage options, compute resources, maybe monitoring tools, security controls, all packaged up in a way that's easy for domain teams to use.
Abstracting away the complexity.
That's the idea. Reduce friction, accelerate development, let the domains be agile and self-sufficient in managing their data products.
Okay, the counter-argument.
Building and maintaining a truly effective, comprehensive, and user-friendly self-serve platform, that is a monumental engineering task. It's expensive, requires specialized skills, and it's never done. It needs constant evolution.
And if the platform isn't good enough?
Then it fails. Either the domains can't use it effectively, or it just pushes the complexity back onto them, the exact opposite of the intention. It can become a bottleneck itself, or just a source of frustration.
Right, so a huge dependency there. What's the 4th pillar?
Federated computational governance. This is arguably the linchpin that tries to hold the whole decentralized system together without it descending into chaos.
Federated, computational. Okay, break that down.
Federated means it's not entirely top-down central control, but it's also not a free-for-all. There's a central governance body, usually cross-functional with reps from different domains, and central IT security legal. They define the global rules of the road.
Global rules like what?
Minimum quality standards, security policies, privacy regulations like GDPR or CCPA, data modeling standards, interoperability protocols, how data products should be documented, the essential enterprise-wide stuff.
Okay, and the computational part.
That's key. It means these global policies aren't just written down in a document somewhere. They are embedded into the self-serve platform and automated as much as possible. Through automated checks, validation routines, monitoring, access controls enforced by the platform itself. For example, the platform might automatically scan data for PII, validate schemas, enforce access policies based on roles. This allows governance to scale across many domains without manual policing everywhere.
So domains have autonomy within those automated guardrails.
Exactly. They manage their data products, adapting global policies to their specific context, but they must adhere to the centrally defined, computationally enforced standards. Things like data contracts, formal agreements between producers and consumers about schema, quality, SLAs become critical artifacts here.
Okay, sounds complex. And the critique.
This is almost universally flagged in the sources as the most difficult principle to implement effectively. Finding that balance between domain autonomy and necessary global control is incredibly delicate, easy to get wrong.
Very easy. If the global policies are too vague or high level, or if the automation isn't robust or consistent across the platform, you risk fragmented governance. Different domains interpret rules differently, leading to inconsistencies, compliance gaps, and undermining interoperability.
The governance chaos scenario.
Precisely. And relying heavily on that computational enforcement. That's a massive ongoing technical challenge. Any gaps or errors in the automation could lead to serious data breaches, quality disasters, or compliance failures. Decentralization also increases the security attack surface.
More points of potential failure.
Yep. Critics worry that without incredibly strong central oversight and auditing, which sort of goes against the pure decentralization idea, it could easily devolve into those data fiefdoms, making enterprise-wide reporting or compliance management a nightmare. It feels quite idealistic to assume all domains will just diligently follow all the rules without robust, automated checks and balances.
Wow. Okay, breaking down those 4 pillars really lays bare the internal tensions. Each one promises something significant: better quality, agility, usability, scalable governance, but each comes with these massive practical hurdles.
Yeah, culture shifts, skills gaps, huge engineering efforts, coordination complexity.
And the sources really emphasize they're interconnected. Weakness in one, like a poor platform or shaky governance, can completely undermine the benefits of the others. It's not a pick-and-choose menu.
Definitely not. It requires that deep commitment across the board.
So, thinking about your own organization, or ones you know, how easy or difficult would it feel to implement all 4 of these pillars effectively? What jumps out as the biggest mountain to climb?
Good question. Okay, let's pull back a bit. How does data mesh compare to other architectures? We've touched on centralized systems, and data fabric came up.
Right, so from the pro-data mesh side, the comparison to traditional centralized warehouses or lakes is stark. Data mesh is designed to break those scalability bottlenecks where the central team just can't cope.
By distributing the work.
Exactly. It scales the organization along with the data by pushing ownership out. Proponents argue this naturally improves data quality and relevance too, because the domain experts own it. Agility goes up because domains aren't stuck in the central queue.
Okay. And versus data fabric, how's it different?
Data mesh puts a much heavier emphasis on that organizational and cultural transformation, the decentralized ownership, the product thinking. It sees itself as more fundamentally changing how the organization works with data for value creation. Data fabric, in contrast, is often positioned more as a technology integration layer.
Like connecting existing dots.
Sort of. Fabric often focuses on using tech like virtualization, semantic layers, knowledge graphs to provide unified access and governance over existing, potentially distributed data sources, often without demanding that radical shift in ownership structure that data mesh requires. So mesh is seen by proponents as more transformative, fabric perhaps more pragmatic or additive.
Okay, but let's defend the other approaches for a moment. Well-run centralized systems, they can work, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you're not Netflix scale.
Absolutely.
They offer that valuable single source of truth, which is important. And often they're more cost-effective, simpler to manage, particularly if you modernize them with cloud tech. Critics argue data mesh introduces huge complexity and cost-duplicated efforts in domains, building that massive platform, all the upskilling.
The cost factor is definitely a big counterargument.
And compared to data fabric, many sources see fabric as a much less disruptive path. You leverage existing systems, focus on integration and access, without that massive organizational restructuring data mesh demands. It seems like a gentler evolution for many.
Less risky, perhaps.
Potentially. And again, the risk with data mesh, if governance isn't perfect, is creating those new silos. Centralized systems, at least in principle, are designed to prevent that fragmentation.
Yeah, that comparison table in the source is useful here. It lays out the differences: starkly ownership, governance goals, scalability focus, agility levers, challenges, organizational impact.
And reinforces that there's no one-size-fits-all.
Definitely not. The best architecture is so context-dependent. Scale, complexity, data maturity, culture, strategic goals, and crucially, that willingness for deep organizational change.
And the cost thing is tricky too, isn't it? Data mesh implementation is clearly expensive, but proponents might argue the hidden costs of slow, unresponsive, centralized systems are also huge.
Opportunity costs, yeah. So considering your organization, its size, complexity, culture, how does data mesh stack up? Does it feel like a potential fit, or do modernized central systems or maybe data fabric seem more realistic?
Interesting thought. Okay, what about the buzz? Data mesh has been everywhere since 2019. Is this popularity a sign that it's really needed, or is it just hype?
Proponents definitely argue the popularity signals its relevance. It's clearly tapping into real frustrations with older models in our data-driven world.
Addressing a genuine need.
Right. And the fact that its core principles align with successful trends in software microservices, agile product thinking, gives it a certain credibility, especially in tech-forward organizations.
And the big names using it.
Yeah, proponents point to companies like Netflix, JPMC, Intuit, Adidas, Zalando. They're actively experimenting or adopting principles. That's cited as evidence it's not just theoretical, it can be applied practically in complex settings. The ongoing debate and vendor support also show it's having a real impact.
Okay, but the critics view that popularity with a lot more skepticism. Hype over proven success, maybe?
That's the angle. They argue it's still early days. Widespread, mature adoption across typical companies outside those tech giants, still pretty rare.
Fits the hype cycle model.
Exactly. And again, that Gartner assessment innovation trigger in 2022, projecting obsolete before plateau, suggests maybe it's just too complex or flawed for broad adoption and benefit realization, at least at that time.
And the partial adoption point comes up again.
Yes. Many sources suggest lots of data mesh initiatives are really just picking parts, like data product management or building a platform, but skipping the truly hard organizational changes, like full decentralization and federated governance.
Diluting the concept, perhaps.
Potentially. And then there's the anecdotal evidence, maybe harder to quantify but present in practitioner communities, of companies really struggling, hitting walls with cost, or even abandoning their data mesh efforts because they created new problems, like those stubborn silos.
So it's a mixed bag. Intense interest suggests something needs to change.
Right, which is valuable in itself, even if data mesh isn't the universal answer. But the Gartner forecast, the partial adoptions, the reported struggles, those are serious counterpoints. Is the buzz driving unrealistic expectations? Is it a necessary step or just too difficult for most? What's your sense of the buzz? Does it feel like real potential or maybe the latest trend?
The bottom line question, I guess, is effectiveness. Does it actually solve the problems it claims to solve? Or does it, as critics fear, just create new ones?
Proponents are firm.
Yeah.
Yes, it's effective because it tackles root causes. It breaks down silos, organizational and technical, by making data discoverable, addressable, interoperable via that platform and governance layer.
Leading to.
Better agility, faster time to value because domains aren't blocked by central IT, and fundamentally better data quality and trust because ownership sits with the domain experts who actually understand the context and can define meaningful quality standards like SLOs for their data products.
Okay. The critical view.
That it often just shifts the problems or creates worse ones. Silos again. Decentralization without perfect governance and strong sharing incentives. High risk of creating more, smaller, harder to integrate silos. The fragmentation nightmare.
Right. Agility, sure. Domains might get local agility, but the sources warn about the immense organizational coordination required to make everything work together across the mesh, managing dependencies, ensuring interoperability, compliance. That overhead can kill agility.
Complexity doesn't disappear, it just moves.
Exactly. It gets pushed out to domain teams who might lack the skills. This can lead to inconsistent quality across data products, duplicated work. One source literally said teams were doing the same transformations many times without even knowing it, and higher overall costs.
And data quality.
It hinges entirely on that big assumption that every domain can and will become a sophisticated data producer. That's a huge leap of faith. Without that deep data as a product, culture, and strong platform support everywhere, inconsistent quality seems almost inevitable, and flawed governance just adds confusion.
So effectiveness really seems to depend on pulling off all four principles, holistically and maturely. Governance and the platform seem absolutely critical.
And that point about technical scaling, letting domains build stuff in parallel, maybe making the organizational scaling challenges like coordination and skills even harder. That's a sharp insight.
It is. And if the core problem data mesh wants to solve is aligning data with the business, it only works if the business truly embraces that ownership, sees it as enabling value, not just more IT work dumped on them.
Yeah. So weighing those arguments, thinking about your data world, does data mesh feel more like a solution or a source of new complexities? What's the biggest risk factor for you?
Okay, so if it's so complex and risky, who is it actually right for? When does data mesh make sense, and when is it definitely the wrong path?
The sources suggesting good fits paint a pretty specific picture.
Which is?
Large, complex organizations, lots of diverse business units, intricate data flowing everywhere, where centralization has clearly, demonstrably hit its limits. Scale and complexity seem key. High existing data maturity. This is crucial. You need decent governance, data literacy, established processes already in place. It's not a magic bullet to fix a low maturity environment. It builds on maturity.
Right, that requires it as a prerequisite.
Exactly. A culture that already leans towards autonomy, collaboration, maybe some product thinking is helpful. Those teal organizations sometimes get mentioned, places with self-management, evolutionary purpose,
Technical foundations.
strong distributed systems skills,
Yeah.
DevOps practices, likely already leveraging cloud-native infrastructure, and absolutely non-negotiable. Strong executive sponsorship and clear strategic alignment. It has to be seen as a strategic imperative, not just an IT project.
Okay, so that's the good fit. What about the bad fit, or don't even think about it yet?
Pretty much the opposite. Small or medium businesses with simpler needs. Centralized is probably way more efficient and sensible.
Low data maturity, weak governance.
Definitely not ready. Data mesh will likely make those problems worse, not better. You need the foundations first. Highly centralized command and control cultures. They'll likely fight the necessary decentralization tooth and nail. Resources. If you don't have the budget for significant, sustained investment in the platform, the massive upskilling effort, new roles, potentially higher ongoing costs, it's probably not feasible.
And if things are working okay now?
Yeah, if your data needs are relatively stable and your current central team is managing okay, maybe with some modernization, the disruption and cost of data mesh might be completely unnecessary. Modernizing what you have could be far more pragmatic.
That readiness checklist in the sources is quite useful, isn't it? Looking at scale, maturity, culture, tech skills, leadership, resources, strategic need.
It really helps frame it. And it highlights that tension again, needing maturity versus seeing it as a path to maturity. The sources strongly warn against the latter view.
It's a fundamental shift in operating model, not just a tech upgrade. So honestly, assessing your own organization against that list, are you a candidate? Or are there big foundational gaps to address first?
Okay, let's say an organization ticks the boxes, decides data mesh is the strategic direction. How do they actually implement it? What does that journey look like, according to the proponents?
Well, the first thing Proponents stress is that it's a sociotechnical evolution,
Yeah.
not a big bang project. It's ongoing change across people, process, technology.
Iterative.
Yes, strongly recommended. Start small. Pilot projects. Maybe pick one business domain, aim to deliver just 2 or 3 high-value data products in, say, 6 months. Learn, adapt, iterate, then scale. Don't try to boil the ocean.
Technology enablers.
Cloud platforms are pretty much assumed AWS, Azure, GCP.
Yeah.
Then specific tools for the self-serve platform. Storage, processing, ETL, ELT, streaming tech, API management, good data catalogs are critical for discovery, tabulation, Calibra, AWS Glue catalog. Open formats like Apache Iceberg often come up for managing data lake tables reliably.
And the people side.
Clear roles are vital. Data product owners in the domains, dedicated domain data teams, a central platform team focused on enabling the domains. And those data contracts we mentioned, formalizing the interfaces and expectations between data products, become essential for interoperability.
Okay, that sounds like the ideal path.
Yeah.
What about the implementation challenges highlighted by critics? The reality check.
They paint a picture of immense difficulty and high failure risk. The investment is huge, upfront, and ongoing. Technology, platform maintenance, massive training and upskilling needs across many teams, new roles, potentially high cloud costs per domain. It adds up.
Standardization is a big one, right?
Absolutely. Getting all those autonomous domains to consistently adhere to standards for metadata, schemas, APIs, quality metrics, security policies, that's incredibly hard to achieve and enforce across a large organization. Requires meticulous effort.
And coordinate.
Despite the goal of autonomy, there's still massive cross-domain coordination needed. Managing dependencies between data products, resolving conflicts, ensuring everyone interprets data consistently. That overhead can be crippling. And the risk of partial implementation.
High. Starting but not finishing, or only implementing parts, often leads to disillusionment. You incur the costs and disruption, but don't get the full benefits, and might even make things worse. Plus, the disruption during the transition can be significant, and mature tools and established best practices for large-scale mesh are still evolving.
So it's this constant balancing act during implementation. Empowering domains versus ensuring enterprise coherence. Investing heavily in the platform versus building the skills and culture to use it. Phased rollout versus maintaining momentum.
Yeah, the cost, standardization, and coordination challenges seem relentless, require serious planning and unwavering commitment.
Imagine kicking off a data mesh project. Which challenge feels the most daunting? The tech build, the standards fight, the coordination nightmare, the cost justification.
Let's drill down on governance again. It keeps coming up as make or break. That federated computational governance model. How does it really work, and why is it so risky?
Proponents describe it as the smart way to balance autonomy with a central control. Not rigid central command, but not chaos either.
How is that balance achieved?
Through that central, cross-functional governance body defining global standards, security, privacy, quality minimums, interoperability rules. But the key is a computational part.
The automation.
Right. Embedding these policies into the platform. Automated checks, validation, monitoring, enforcement. This makes governance scalable. Domains operate freely within these automated guardrails, adapting global policies locally but staying compliant. Data contracts codify the specifics, and automated lineage helps track usage for compliance.
That's the theory, the critics' concerns.
Practicality and risk. Achieving that perfect balance is just really, really hard. If global policies are too vague, or the automation is inconsistent or has gaps, you get fragmentation. Different domains doing different things, undermining the whole point. Inconsistent data, compliance holes.
Exactly. And building and maintaining that sophisticated computational enforcement layer across a diverse mesh, that's a massive technical and operational burden. Errors in the automation could be disastrous data breaches, failed audits.
And decentralization increases risk points.
Increases the attack surface, yeah. More places where things can go wrong. Critics worry that without very strong central oversight and auditing, which feels a bit counter to pure decentralization, it can easily slide into those data fiefdoms, that governance chaos, making enterprise reporting or holistic compliance almost impossible. It feels idealistic to assume automation alone solves it without constant vigilance and human oversight.
So, it's the core dilemma. How do you empower domains without losing critical enterprise control? especially around security and compliance. Success hinges entirely on clear global policies, robust platform automation, domain diligence, and effective central oversight.
If any of those fail, the risks, fragmentation, inconsistency, security gaps, compliance failures are huge.
Yeah, data contracts and lineage sound great, but getting them implemented universally and correctly is a major hurdle itself. Which
Yeah.
feels riskier to you, the old rigidity of central governance or the potential fragmentation of this federated model?
This keeps bringing us back to the people side. Data mesh as a sociotechnical thing. What's the promised organizational change? The upside.
Proponents paint it as a catalyst for really positive cultural change. It fundamentally alters how data is viewed and managed.
How so?
By creating clear ownership and accountability within the business domains, it fosters real data stewardship. Providing the self-serve platform empowers those teams. They shift from passive consumers waiting on IT to active creators driving value with data. They can innovate faster, be more agile.
New roles emerge too.
Yeah, like the data product owner acting like a mini CEO for their domain's data.
Mm-hmm.
And the central data team evolves, becoming platform enablers, not gatekeepers. The ideal is better collaboration, breaking down silos, boosting data literacy everywhere, and cultivating a truly data-driven culture.
Okay, that's the vision. Now the reality check from the critics. The barriers.
They argue this cultural change is data mesh's biggest weakness, its Achilles heel. The vision is often miles away from the organizational reality.
Resistance.
Huge amounts.
Yeah.
From traditional central IT, reluctant to give up control, and from business domains who might feel unwilling or more often completely unequipped to take on these complex new data responsibilities. They might just see it as a burden. Getting buy-in is tough.
Incredibly tough, and keeping it sustained is even harder. Role confusion is another big one. Who does what? Data product owner versus existing roles can lead to ambiguity, turf wars, inefficiency.
And the skills gap again.
Monumental. Domains need data engineering, governance expertise, product management skills that requires enormous investment in training, hiring, or both. Without that upskilling, the data products won't be high quality, defeating the purpose. The sources consistently say this massive cultural shift is underestimated, leading to many failures.
So the human element is absolutely pivotal. Proponents see empowerment and clarity. Critics see inertia, resistance, skill gaps, and transition chaos.
It's far more than just technology.
Absolutely. Requires leadership, real change management, and a very honest look at whether the organization can actually make such a deep cultural shift. Thinking about your workplace culture, how big would this shift feel? How realistic is it?
Okay, last big area, real-world adoption. We hear the names Netflix, JPMC. Are these success stories representative, or are they just outliers? What's the reality?
Proponents definitely highlight these high-profile examples. Netflix using it to manage massive scale, enable innovation, get faster time to market. JPMC enhancing their platform, empowering owners, improving reporting through better visibility. Intuit talking about creating a flywheel of new data products by empowering workers.
And others too.
Yeah, companies like Zalando, Adidas, ABN AMRO have shared their journeys. Proponents argue these show data mesh can deliver on its promises of scalability, agility, and value in complex, real-world environments.
Okay, the skeptical take.
Critics urge caution. View these stories critically. Many are from huge, tech-savvy companies with unique talent pools, massive resources, and often pre-existing agile cultures. Their success might not be easily replicable in a typical enterprise. Lack of detail.
Often, yeah. Public case studies might gloss over the challenges, the failures, the true cost versus benefits. Reference architectures tend to be high-level, not detailed blueprints. Critics call for more broad, independent research across different industries and company sizes.
And the partial adoption issue persists here too.
Definitely. Are these companies implementing the full data mesh vision, including the hard organizational and governance parts, or just adopting some principles? The sources suggest many are partial or proxy implementations.
In the failures.
We hear anecdotal reports, especially in practitioner forums, of companies hitting significant roadblocks, finding costs unsustainable, or even abandoning data mesh efforts because they created new silos or couldn't overcome the cultural barriers. The lack of widespread, verified success stories across average companies, plus warnings like Gartner's, makes critics suspect the narrative is skewed by these early, perhaps exceptional adopters.
So it's a genuinely mixed picture out there. The pioneers show what's possible, maybe under ideal conditions with massive effort. But replicability, especially the full sociotechnical transformation in more typical organizations, that's still a big question mark.
Yeah, the challenges of partial adoption, legacy integration, true long-term costs. We need more evidence.
It really seems the success of the journey depends so heavily on specific context, maturity, resources, and that unwavering commitment to the whole sociotechnical package. Does seeing companies like Netflix try this make it seem more achievable for others, or maybe less so, given their unique advantages?
That was quite the journey through the arguments. It's clear, as all the sources really hammer home, data mesh isn't just another way to wire up databases. It's a fundamental rethinking.
It's a socio-technical paradigm, yeah. Demands organizations change how they think about data, who owns it, how value is created.
We've seen the pro arguments tackling bottlenecks, boosting agility and quality, aligning with the business. Really compelling stuff.
But we've also hit the con arguments hard. The sheer complexity, the cost, the massive cultural hurdles, the implementation nightmares, the governance tightrope, significant risks.
So whether it becomes the dominant way forward or its ideas just influence future architectures, that's still up in the air.
Definitely. But the conversation has started about decentralization, domain ownership, treating data like a product. That conversation isn't going away. It's clearly resonating with real needs.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you, our listeners, to chew on. Given all these immense human and organizational challenges we've discussed, the culture clashes, the skills gaps, the governance complexity,
Yeah.
is data mesh's real lasting value actually in achieving its full grand vision? Or is its main contribution forcing organizations to finally grapple with those deep-seated cultural, governance, and ownership problems that plagued centralized approaches for decades anyway?
Is the destination less important than the difficult, maybe necessary journey it forces you to take towards better data practices, regardless of whether you reach a perfect mesh?
Something to ponder.
Indeed. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the complex world of data mesh.
Yeah, thanks for listening. And be sure to subscribe to Joy of Architecture so you don't miss our future deep dives.